Most people believe retirement fails at the end. When the money runs low, when the numbers stop working, when the panic finally arrives, that belief is wrong. Retirement doesn't fail at the end. It fails much earlier, quietly, structurally, and without triggering alarm. And the most dangerous part is this. By the time most people realize something is wrong, every meaningful option has already become expensive, restricted, or irreversible. This video is not about bad decisions. It's not about market crashes. It's not about people being careless, uninformed, or irresponsible. It's about how the retirement system gradually changes its behavior while appearing stable enough to keep you calm. Nothing dramatic happens, nothing breaks, nothing forces action, and that's exactly why it works. For decades, retirement was framed as a destination, a finish line, a moment where discipline finally turns into freedom. Save consistently. Follow the rules, delay gratification, trust the structure. The promise was simple: if you behave correctly long enough, control eventually returns to you. But systems don't fail by breaking promises. They fail by redefining them. Slowly, legally, and just quietly enough that most people adjust instead of resist. At first, the changes feel technical. Contribution rules are refined. Withdrawal guidelines become more flexible. Tax treatments are adjusted for long-term sustainability. Benefit formulas are updated to reflect demographic realities. Each update sounds reasonable on its own. None of them feel personal. None of them demand immediate attention. But taken together, they alter the shape of retirement without ever announcing that anything fundamental has changed. The system doesn't remove your choices. It reframes them. Choice still exists, but within narrower corridors. You can move left or right, forward or backward, but the walls shift inward slowly enough that adaptation feels like maturity rather than confinement. And adaptation is rewarded. Calm savers are praised. Calm retirees are normalized. Calm acceptance is framed as wisdom. Panic is discouraged. Urgency is framed as irresponsibility. Questioning the structure itself is labeled emotional, unrealistic, or uninformed. The system doesn't need compliance through force. It only needs low volatility in behavior. That's why the most important feature of modern retirement systems is not growth. It's predictability, predictable contributions, predictable withdrawals, predictable lifespans, predictable expectations. Stability at the system level requires flexibility to be absorbed at the individual level, and that absorption rarely feels like loss. It feels like adjustment. People don't say, "I lost control." They say, "I guess this is just how it works now." That sentence appears everywhere, across income levels, professions, and generations. "I thought I'd have more. I don't know where it went. I'm fine, I just can't do what I imagined." Those statements are not failures of planning. They are signals of a system that optimized for calm rather than freedom. The word security appears constantly in retirement language. Income security, retirement security, financial security. Security sounds protective, reassuring, responsible, but security is also containment. Security defines boundaries. It limits variance. It prioritizes system continuity over individual optionality. And once you cross a certain threshold, security replaces agency. Not suddenly, not violently, quietly. Automatic enrollment becomes the default. Suggested contribution rates become the norm. Target date structures imply inevitability rather than choice. Everything is framed to help you. And it does as long as your goal aligns with the system's assumptions. But assumptions age. Lifespans change. Costs evolve. Inflation behaves differently across decades. Healthcare expands unpredictably. Yet the structure remains optimized for averages. And averages are comfortable places for systems, but fragile places for individuals. Complexity plays its role perfectly. The rules aren't hidden. They're layered, footnotes, exceptions, timelines that only make sense when tracked over 30 or 40 years. You can understand them theoretically, but only if you dedicate time most people no longer have. Complexity doesn't eliminate resistance, it exhausts it. By the time you fully understand the implications, you're already invested financially, emotionally, and temporally. Walking away is no longer free. Changing direction is no longer simple. Every alternative carries friction, penalties, or opportunity cost. This is why retirement confusion is more common than retirement anger. Anger requires contrast. Confusion feels personal. People assume they misunderstood something. They assume they miscalculated. They assume responsibility without realizing how little agency remains. Responsibility without power is a quiet burden. The system continues to function. The numbers still work on paper. The projections remain technically successful. But success has been redefined. Not abundance, not independence. Managed stability. And managed stability always has a cost, not always in dollars, often in options. This video is about that cost, not at the end of retirement but before it. In the years when people still feel safe enough not to question, yet invested enough to sense something is off. That is the most fragile moment in the entire system, not when people panic, but when they stay calm. Because calm is what the system needs most. And once you understand that, retirement stops looking like a destination. It starts looking like a handoff, from personal control to institutional management, from flexibility to dependency, from freedom delayed to freedom rationed, not aggressively, not maliciously, efficiently. And the question this video begins with is not how to fix the system. The moment people realize something is wrong is rarely dramatic. There is no clear shock, no single statement, no obvious betrayal. What appears instead is friction, small delays, unexpected limitations, rules that technically allow movement but punish it. This is where most people assume the problem is timing. I should have noticed earlier. If I had acted sooner. If I had adjusted 5 years ago. But timing is not the root issue. The real problem is that the system is designed so that awareness arrives after leverage disappears. Early in your working life, the system gives you flexibility but little urgency. Later, it gives you urgency but removes flexibility. That inversion is not accidental. When you are young, contribution rules are forgiving. Withdrawals are discouraged. Penalties protect the system's long-term capital base. You are told to wait, to trust compounding, to avoid touching anything. And waiting feels rational, even virtuous. But as years pass, the structure subtly changes its tone. Access becomes more complex. Tax exposure becomes less predictable. Healthcare costs start to distort projections. The system doesn't stop working. It just starts prioritizing its own continuity over your optionality. By the time retirement approaches, you are no longer navigating a growth phase. You are navigating an exit phase. And exits are always regulated. Withdrawal sequences matter. Tax brackets compress. Required distributions appear. Penalties shift from discouraging access to enforcing timelines. You are no longer deciding if to act. You are deciding how expensively to comply. This is why the sense of control evaporates without a clear moment of loss. Nothing is taken. Everything is conditioned. You can still move, but movement now triggers consequences. Delay costs you in taxes. Acceleration costs you in penalties. Staying put costs you in inflation. Every option has friction, and friction shapes behavior more effectively than force ever could. The system does not need to forbid alternatives. It only needs to make them uncomfortable. This is where many people confuse structure with inevitability. They assume the system behaves this way because it must, because demographics changed, because markets evolved, because longevity increased. Those factors matter, but they are not explanations. They are justifications. The deeper reason control cannot be reclaimed is that modern retirement systems are not built to maximize individual outcomes. They are built to stabilize aggregate behavior. Predictable withdrawals reduce volatility. Predictable lifespans support actuarial balance. Predictable expectations prevent political pressure. Unpredictable retirees create noise. Noise forces reform. Reform introduces risk. So the system absorbs uncertainty by narrowing individual choice, and it does so invisibly. Most people never see the architecture. They only experience the surface. A letter, a notification, a revised projection. Each message is polite. Each change sounds technical. Each explanation feels reasonable. But reasonableness is not neutrality. Reasonableness is how constraints are accepted without resistance. This is why retirement conversations feel strangely subdued. People are not outraged. They are resigned. They say things like, "At least it's stable. At least I know what to expect. At least it didn't collapse." Stability becomes the metric of success. But stability for whom? A system can be perfectly stable while individuals quietly lose range. The system can function smoothly while people gradually redefine freedom downward. This is not failure, it is performance. The system is doing exactly what it was optimized to do: prevent extremes, dampen volatility, keep outcomes within manageable bands. And in doing so, it transforms retirement from a period of autonomy into a period of compliance. Not overt compliance, administrative compliance, forms, timelines, rules that appear neutral but encode assumptions you did not choose. You are still responsible, but responsibility no longer comes with authority. You must plan, but only within preset corridors. You must adjust, but only after the system adjusts first. This is why reclaiming control feels impossible, because control was never meant to be reclaimed at that stage. The handoff has already occurred. And once responsibility has been separated from power, frustration becomes internalized. People blame themselves. They revisit old decisions. They assume personal error. That self-blame is stabilizing. It prevents collective questioning. It prevents systemic pressure. It keeps dissatisfaction individualized. And that is the final mechanism, not restriction, not deception, isolation. Each person believes their shortfall is unique. Each person adjusts privately. Each person absorbs the cost alone. The system remains calm, and calm is the signal that everything is working. But calm is not the absence of loss. It is the absence of resistance. In the next block, we'll confront the most uncomfortable part of all. Not how the system changed, but why most people defend it even after sensing what it took from them. The most surprising thing about retirement failure is not how quietly it happens. It's how fiercely people defend the structure even after it stops serving them. You would expect anger. You would expect backlash. You would expect demands for change. Instead, you hear justification. They did the best they could. The system can't support everyone. That's just how the economy works now. At least it didn't completely collapse. These statements don't come from ignorance. They come from psychological survival. Once someone has invested decades into a framework, questioning that framework becomes emotionally dangerous. Because if the system failed them, then the rules they followed were never neutral. And if the rules were never neutral, then discipline alone was never enough. That realization is destabilizing. So the mind does something very specific. It protects the system, not because the system is fair, but because believing in it preserves meaning. If the system is flawed but necessary, then personal sacrifice still makes sense. If the system is unfair but unavoidable, then disappointment feels tolerable. If the system is broken but complex, then responsibility can be diffused. This is why people rarely say, I was managed. They say. I guess I didn't plan well enough. Self-blame restores order, and order is comforting. The system doesn't need propaganda. It benefits from identity. For decades, people are told they are responsible, rational, forward-thinking participants. That identity becomes valuable. Losing money hurts. Losing identity hurts more. So people defend the structure that validated their choices, even when evidence accumulates, even when projections shrink, even when freedom feels narrower than promised. The language adapts. Retirement isn't about luxury. Freedom is overrated. I don't need much. These are not lies. They are recalibrations. The system teaches people to lower expectations gracefully, then rewards them for doing so. Contentment becomes a moral achievement, and questioning the framework becomes immature, unrealistic, or entitled. This is how structural loss becomes socially normalized. No one needs to silence critics. Critics silence themselves, because pushing too hard risks destabilizing everyone's narrative at once. And narratives are what hold systems together. This is also why reforms are incremental. Large changes create visibility. Visibility creates accountability. Accountability creates resistance. So adjustments are spread across decades, one rule at a time, one threshold at a time, one temporary measure at a time. By the time the cumulative effect is obvious, there is no single villain, only complexity. And complexity absorbs blame better than any institution ever could. People say, it's too complicated to fix. No one could have predicted this. Markets changed. But markets don't design rules, systems do. And systems are shaped by incentives. Incentives to reduce volatility. Incentives to maintain solvency. Incentives to avoid political shock. Individual freedom is rarely an incentive. It is a variable. This is the quiet truth. Retirement systems are not designed to maximize your agency. They are designed to manage your behavior across time. They reward predictability. They discourage deviation. They convert personal futures into manageable flows. And when that conversion succeeds, it feels calm, orderly, responsible, until the moment you realize calm came at the cost of choice, not through theft, not through collapse, through design. And this is where the real question finally emerges. Not whether retirement works, not whether the system will survive, but whether stability, when enforced long enough, becomes indistinguishable from control. And if control has been normalized, then the most dangerous thing isn't loss. It's acceptance. Because once people accept the narrowing quietly, no reform is urgent, no correction is necessary. The system remains efficient, and efficiency does not ask permission. It only asks for compliance. This is not a warning. It is an observation, not about markets, not about politics, but about how systems persist, and why they rarely need to be defended by force. They are defended by people who need them to make sense. And that may be the most powerful design choice of all.